This video is a co-production of Kathy Biehl's Professional Aquarian YouTube channel and Louise Edington's Cosmic Owl YouTube channel.
Here we are back again, Kathy, Biehl, Andy and I, Professional Aquarian, and Andy Bassano Brewer on Facebook. And I don't think we're gonna, maybe at the end we'll say where to find us because we've got so much to cover this week, and I'll put all the links in the description. Is that all right, guys?
Yeah.
And I know,
Absolutely.
I got so many comments going, no updates this week, no updates this week. So here we are. So I think we're going to start. Kathy has compiled her wonderful list of stuff that's happened, and that will lead us into what we're going to talk about today.
These are all observable events in the news that track things that Louise and Andy and I have been saying astrologically and energetically would be happening. We'll get him out of the way. We saw big trouble between the 10th and the 12th or 13th for a certain person on the 10th. His felony sentencing became final, so he is now a felon. And then as the Cancer new moon, full moon kicked in, Louise had pointed out, we had a map, that the Mars was being occulted or sucked up, swallowed up by the moon, and it happened overnight. And just at the very end of the occultation, the January 6th report was released. And all of this was happening with the moon and Mars on a conjunction in Trump's chart between the planet that is money and the planet of other governments or power, Saturn. So it was on his Jupiter, his Venus-Saturn conjunction, and Mars will go back over this again in March. So this is not the end of the story for any of these things. So that's category one. We have consistently been saying that Biden's strong. He's only getting stronger. He is still doing so much. He is not slowing down. I encourage you to look at all of the major things he has actually accomplished just in the last week. The man is working like a demon. He negotiated and achieved the ceasefire in Gaza, even though now Netanyahu is saying, we're going to wait. We know who did that. The White House social media account has been flooding the internet with information about what this administration has accomplished, and much of it has been featuring Kamala Harris front and center. In his farewell address, he did not mention the incoming administration by name, which is going to come up again in a second. We have also been stressing the role and importance of NATO in everything that has been going on. There was a Dutch military plane associated with NATO in LA the weekend after the fires, and then also in DC. No word as to what this plane was doing in either of those places or who was on it. Mark Rutte, the head of NATO, has been very, very busy publicly this week. He appeared before the European Parliament on the day of the Cancer full moon. And my takeaways from I listened to it all, and my takeaways from his comments were, he never put the word president or president-elect in front of Trump's name. He never referred to the incoming administration by name. He tabled a specific question until the new administration. He did acknowledge, he agreed with Trump's assessment that the U.S. has been paying too much and that other NATO members need to contribute more to the budget. And he showed how without U.S. participation, how unfunded it would be. He repeatedly voiced his continuing confidence in the United States remaining a partner. And the only Trump-related question that someone raised that he touched on and grew out of multiple complaints that one NATO member was attacking other NATO members, and Rutte addressed the Denmark and Greenland issue only by the finesse of going with what a Danish government official had said, that this opens the door to a greater conversation about securing the Arctic Ocean. I think all of this is important to note, Ben, there have been lots and lots and lots of NATO meetings this week. They are all streamed. You can go to NATO's website. NATO jets have been moved to Poland because of Russian jets approaching Polish airspace too closely, and the Polish prime minister disclosed that Polish intelligence has uncovered plans by Russia to put incendiary devices on aircraft all over the globe. So global terrorism.
Mhm.
And that leads to you, Louise.
Yeah, well, I've got a friend in Kyiv, and also I found some news reports this morning that Russian jets entered Polish airspace, and Norwegian fighter jets uh, manned by NATO were scrambled in response. And also, did you the Polish Prime Minister he announced that he'd uncovered a plot for Russia to sabotage terrorism, multiple airlines around the whole world. And there was one other thing. Oh, yes, Iran and Russia actually signed a deal just this morning, similar to the deal that Russia has with North Korea. So these kind of things all tell me that kind of the opposite forces are kind of gathering together in all ways. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we have consistently pointed out that whatever's going on
Mm-hmm.
is a global issue. The United States is not the only country that has concerns,
Yes.
and that what's going on is bigger than whatever happened
Mm-hmm.
in November in the US. And Andy tagged Poland as being
Mm-hmm.
a
Oh,
focus of where this would all come.
that's another thing I read, and I cannot remember where, so don't quote me on it if it's wrong. That I read that French forces were preparing to go and put boots on the ground in Ukraine. And there was something else as well, but it'll come to me. Oh, yes. And everybody can just Google this. I keep Googling White House moving trucks, and there are no reports of moving trucks at the White House. There are only reports of moving trucks at Mar-a-Lago. Make of that what you will.
Andy,
Mhm.
Well, I mean, I think it's important to really look at the interconnectedness of all of this. And I mean, we have consistently talked about this. And I specifically, right from jump, said what happens in NATO is going to be important, that NATO will not trust what's happening with the White House, with Trump,
Mhm.
that it will have an impact on the way in which they go about their business. It will have an impact on the way in which they set up their defenses, and it will also have an important impact on the way in which they do military intelligence. Specifically, what I've said consistently from the very beginning is that I expected military intelligence reports to come out of NATO, specifically Eastern Europe, and more specifically Poland, that would have an impact potentially on the way in which we might view our alliances worldwide and how our allies might view us. So I think that people tend to get into this very US centric kind of mindset. And I think it's important to look at the fact that the United States is a small piece of a much bigger puzzle, and that
Mhm.
we have needs to try to maintain these relationships with Europe, with Canada, with the Asian countries, and Trump destabilizes that. And as other people see us in a certain way, that will change the way that they interact with us. That will have a potential impact to us in terms of our defense. It will also have a potential impact in terms of our economy. And all we've been saying consistently is not to look at things happening from the White House as the only game in town, that we have to be mindful of how other countries view us, and how
Mhm.
our long-term relationships with these countries potentially impact the way we go about our business, both internally and on the world stage. And
Mhm.
and the two places that I have kept saying to Kathy that will be interesting are Poland and France. And so I think that uh, Trump's rhetoric is destabilizing, and stability is a very positive thing. And I think that stability will be the norm. So therefore, that changes either the way that we would try to contain Trump, or, I think all this stuff has an impact on Trump. And I think it has an impact on the way in which we um, present ourselves on the world stage. So, yeah, it's going to get entertaining for sure. So that's
And
my speech this morning.
one other point before we look at charts very quickly is that we've talked about this hybrid war many times. Cable cutting, election interference. There's the Smart Election Data website. You can go and find all that data compiled from various things. 200 bomb threats on the day of the election. All of these things, the pieces all seem to be coming together, and you can look at it as well. But my point was that I've heard the actual word war, not hybrid war, used more and more in various places. And I think we did mention a short sharp war. Rosie Insights also mentioned it on their channel, and I think it's quite likely. And I know people will go, oh my God, war. I don't think it's going to look anything like wars in the past. And I think it's going to be over quite quickly. I think they're kind of gathering forces to be strategic about how that's done, personally.
And in that regard, let me just throw in, you can see the final press briefing of the National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan last week. Toward the end of it, he starts to say it's his final briefing, and he stumbles and makes a very curious statement that unless unexpected events bring him back. It seemed very pointed and very deliberate. And I will also point out that prior to the fires breaking out in LA, Kamala Harris's schedule for her last week in office had her traveling the globe, meeting with leaders all over the globe. And apparently she's been doing some of that by phone instead. Just not like winding down behavior, I'll just say.
Not at all. No. So anyway,
before we go to charts, can we talk really briefly? I'm sorry, about what's going on astrologically this weekend, or do you want to leave that till the end?
No, let's talk about that first. Yeah.
And the reason I bring this up is, well, the reason I bring this up is there are two things this weekend that echo or continue influences that were in play during really important moments. And the first one is on the 18th, which is Saturday. And it is a continuation of a story from August 19th. At that point, there's a journey of Venus going on here, okay? A journey of the people, a journey of woman on August 19th, which is when the Democratic National Convention started. Venus was opposite Saturn, and both of them were bearing down on Jupiter in Gemini. And this was pulling in Kamala's chart because she has Venus where Venus was then, and then two planets in her chart that are her change agent signature, Uranus and Pluto, were part of it. So this happens with Venus and Saturn looking at each other from across the sky on December 24th. Jupiter and Saturn had the same kind of relationship, and this time opposite Saturn was Kamala's Uranus, and that was when she suddenly went back to the White House, she and Biden both canceled their plans to be home for Christmas, came back. We don't know why. And this weekend, Venus will be next to, with Saturn. Next to Saturn, with it. So she's gone from looking at being the leader to fusing with it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Something solidified.
I'd also like to mention future degrees and things. We have an eclipse on March the 14th at 23 Virgo, and the moon is in Virgo this weekend and crossing that degree tomorrow as well at the 18th, as that Venus-Saturn conjunction joins, and the moon will aspect Uranus at the degree that Venus and Uranus last met. So, you know, there's all these patterns are coming back this weekend. So, and
the
they
other
will
one
come back again on the blood red moon in June, in March. Sorry.
Mm-hmm. And I've already mentioned March as a pivotal time when something comes back again. So the other thing going on this weekend happens on Sunday, and that is an echo of what happened on July 21st, which was a Capricorn full moon. The moon was at 29 degrees Capricorn and Pluto was at 0 degrees Aquarius. That moon, that full moon, was a bridge between the old way, the old institutional way of doing things, and the new way. And that was the day that, after saying he wasn't going to do it, Biden dropped out of the race and handed things over to Kamala. On that day, Pluto was trining Biden's Neptune, which is his connection to spirit. And he had said in an earlier interview, he would not step down unless the Lord told him to. And I'm betting the Lord told him to. So why do I bring this up? Because on Sunday, the sun will be at 29 degrees Capricorn, just before it moves over into Aquarius, which happens later that day. And it will be, so we'll have the sun at 29 degrees and Pluto just inside the doorway. It'll be at 1 Aquarius, but it's still an echo of what happened on July 21st. And Pluto will be exactly trining Biden's Neptune, his connection to God. It's not over, folks. This sounds insane, but it's not over. I think it's highly likely we will see something unlike anything we've ever seen before. And if you listen to my forecast for next week, if you follow what Louise is forecasting, the end of next week is not doom and despair and chaos. It's weirdly beautiful.
It really is. Yeah. In fact, I'm going to be doing my video forecast for next week today after this. So, yeah, but I agree. I've already looked at the aspects. So, yeah. So we are going to NATO chart first, or who?
Yes. Oh, yes. Let's look at the NATO chart.
So this is the chart for NATO. We've looked at this before, but you know, just talking about what Kathy talked about the sun sitting at 29 degrees Capricorn before moving into Aquarius highlights NATO's Jupiter in Capricorn in the 7th house of open enemies and various other things, the 7th house. So just
ally.
But it can be allies too. Yeah. Politics, allies, significant relationships, really. So it's, and in Capricorn, at that anaretic degree, that last degree, that's kind of like, it speaks to me of shoring up the structures and the what's the word they keep using out there for all of this? The world order. That's what I talk about. The world order that's been in place since World War II, basically.
And that Jupiter is in an inconjunct quincunx adjustment aspect exactly to Saturn in Leo. So there's something here about heads of state, about leaders, about adjusting, doing something, adjusting. Brace for some kind of NATO action this weekend, people.
Yeah. You know, we don't, I don't think we even need to look at other aspects on that, but I'd love to hear your take on it, Andy.
So, I approach this differently, of course. I use astrology primarily for like past lives and synastry. So when I went back, looking back on what was happening in November, to me, what happens is certain places kind of light up for me. It's like the map lights up for me. And that part of the map that lit up for me was Europe, specifically Northern and Eastern Europe. So from Denmark across to including Scandinavia down through from the old Soviet bloc down to Ukraine. And so my feeling then was that they would be a prominent player on the world stage, probably more so than we might have expected in November. That's kind of the way that I operate. I still think that NATO takes a lead role in the way in which things are defined, so that NATO's jockeying for position. The president of Finland just the other day said something I found really interesting, and I'm paraphrasing it a bit. He said that Europe's escape from history, and again, I'm paraphrasing what he said, is over, which means that Europe has to take, and the EU and NATO have to take a lead role in protecting themselves. And Finland's right on Russia's border. I think it's important that we tend to isolate ourselves within the United States, thinking that what we do dominates everything else. But that could change. And I think that the fact that this is potentially in a state of uncertainty is what's so interesting about what comes up in 2025. And I do think that the actions in Eastern Europe and throughout the Middle East, Syria, and that's still a hotbed of things, is going to have an impact on Trump's ability to do what he says he wants to do. And Trump's rhetoric may be entertaining to people in the United States, maybe, but it's certainly not entertaining to people who rely upon the United States as a stabilizing force. The United States is a wild card, and having the United States as a wild card is not a happy experience for people who depend upon us. Just like if suddenly grandpa got Alzheimer's, it's sort of the same kind of thing. So I continue to say that NATO is gigantic in the way in which events play out within the United States, and that there is likely to be more and more intelligence reports coming out of NATO. And as Russia's power diminishes on the world stage, I think militarily and economically, are the people who are invested in supporting Russia, will they flip? And I think that also speaks to what could happen internally within the United States. So it's going to get wilder. And as the events unfold, I think we should expect things to speed up and kind of veer off in unusual directions, at least from an American-centric viewpoint. People who are more conversant with what happens on the world stage are probably not a surprise. But people within the United States may be a little confused by it, but it makes a lot of sense when you think about how NATO and alliances that came about in 1945 after World War II have played out ever since then. Those things are being thrown up into the air, and it's a problem. I mean, it's a significant problem, not just in Europe, but here in the United States too, in my opinion.
One last thing before we move on with charts. Of course, this Saturn sits on Donald Trump's ascendant, Leo ascendant. So all that Kathy said about the sun being at that 29 degree is hitting his chart too. I mean, he might be about to learn a very hard lesson. We'll see.
And speaking of intelligence, there's one other news item I didn't mention. A bill has passed the House that would impose sanctions if the International Criminal Court tries to indict somebody in the U.S. for crimes they committed abroad, which seems to be directed at someone who has been accused of meddling in the elections all over Europe. Anyway, so that seems to indicate that people in the house, at least, know that someone's
Mm.
been doing things that could lead to international criminal court charges. Now, the US doesn't recognize the jurisdiction of it, but it's still a big deal if somebody in the US gets convicted by, or if there's a warrant out for their arrest, there are certain countries they can't go to anymore. There are ramifications. So NATO has intel, I think, is what this means.
I agree. All right, so do we want to say anything more about this chart, or do we want to look at it with one of the next charts, or which do you want to do? I don't mind which. I can look at both or either.
Oh, why don't we look at Tusk's chart?
Yes. So the leader of Poland, I can't remember, is he president or PM? But either way, the leader of
I think
Poland.
it's prime minister.
Yeah, I think it's prime minister. Funnily enough, his name is Donald, and Tusk, so his name begins with a T. But anyway, as I mentioned at the start, he made this speech saying he'd uncovered this plot. And then we've got, all this action in Poland with fighter jets being scrambled and Russia entering their airspace with jets. And he has quite the chart, Donald Tusk. Now, his time comes from an astrology site in Poland, Astro Databank, which is what we usually use for accurate chart data, says they don't know where that time came from, but it's the one that's used. It came from a Polish site, so I went with the timed chart, and this gives him a fixed Grand Cross, which is really powerful for a start, with Neptune in Scorpio, Uranus in Leo, the Sun and Venus in Taurus, right at the root of the chart, and almost more importantly, the Moon at 1 Aquarius, where Pluto sits right now. Incidentally, his angles are exactly the same as mine, Kathy. Oh my God.
There is no such thing as coincidence.
Yeah. So, what do you say, Cassie?
Well, that fixed Grand Cross to me says just the fact that it's fixed is a sign of intractable, like this man can just dig in. Interestingly, though, with Uranus being part of it, I would imagine that he has had moments of things shifting really, really suddenly and wildly. And with Pluto moving across his moon and triggering his Uranus, he's not going to just sit and be quiet at all with this. I will also point out that his Sun and Venus are on Biden's moon. So there's a
Yes.
natural affinity there.
And I'm going to put the transits round, if that's all right, so we can kind of point at what's going on. Just so here we go. The today's transits, not next year's, and so here's Pluto, and then Biden's moon is was it 0 or 1 Taurus?
It's zero.
Anyway,
It's a zero.
yeah,
Taurus.
0 Taurus. So he's got that happening. Because his chart is very similar to mine, I will tell you that. His ascendant is conjunct the galactic center, which is a really powerful position for kind of like seeing the truth of what's going on. So I found it interesting that he was the one to say there's this plot. This plot, you can find it online, you can find the articles. He said it was to basically bring acts of terrorism against airlines across the world. So, it was pretty big. But yes, but he's also got, just to go back to his natal chart, as well as this fixed Grand Cross, he has a fixed T-square from his moon's nodes to Chiron in Aquarius. And so he's got this energy of intractability, but also more like when he's stirred to action, he is determined to really kind of keep what's built, keep what's been manifested. That always speaks to me with fixed signs too. They like to keep the status quo. You know, they like to keep the order that things are in. So,
And with that, I want to point out that he has some significant contacts to the United States. His Saturn at 13 Sagittarius, so he's a stabilizing, this is a guy who believes in law, is on top of the US ascendant. His Mars at 22 Gemini is on top of the US Mars. His Jupiter at 22 Virgo is on the US Neptune. So that would, I mean, he would have been brought up, I believe, with an idealistic view of what the United States is or could be. I will point out, because I know that there are those out there who'd love this degree, note that his midheaven is 23 degrees.
Oh, no, it's not. No, because he was born northern latitudes.
I'm looking at the wrong thing. I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Ignore me.
Yeah, his midheaven is 6 Scorpio, but his Jupiter is conjunct the 9th house cusp, which is the degree, that 23 Virgo degree, where we have an eclipse coming up on March the 14th. And you often feel the energy of eclipses coming before they hit. And it's a total lunar eclipse, so it's a biggie.
And the final thing I will mention is that his Pluto is opposite the United States moon, so he has a connection to the people of this country. This all of me says he would be involved in shoring us up. Okay, I'm sorry.
And no, fine. And it's on Donald Trump's ascendant again. That
Pluto on his ascendant.
Yeah.
And also look at his Mars. Look at Tusk's Mars in relationship to Trump.
It's on his sun.
Mm-hmm.
And it's on his nodes, and it's opposing his moon.
Mm-hmm.
And Kamala also has her Mercury is at 1 Scorpio, so it's connected into his Grand Cross as well. Mm-hmm. But the thing that jumps out to me is how he has this, what I would say, antagonistic kind of interchange with Trump's chart, with Pluto at 28 Leo and Mars at 22 Gemini.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm pretty certain he does not.
He doesn't like Donald Trump.
Like Donald Trump, yes. Yeah. Any more to say on him? So,
I just want to point out that in recent weeks, Poland has taken over. I think Poland has taken over the lead in. It's now the base of where all the Ukraine actions are. The U.S. was leading, and now Poland is leading, and now Poland is saying
it's NATO leading in Poland.
In Poland, but the U.S. was.
U.S. was doing it. Yeah,
was doing it, and now Poland is doing it. And how fascinating that the man who's kind of like the embodiment of Poland, its leader, is the one bringing this intel out. And something tells me it's not the only intel he has. Just
I'm pretty.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. The other thing that's really interesting about Donald Tusk is that he is a 4-5 dominant, which means that his heart chakra and his throat chakra are dominant. That sets up a certain kind of energy pattern. But he also, at this point in time, because I just looked at him yesterday, I'd never seen him before. He has a constriction in his throat chakra, and he has a constriction between his heart chakra and his throat chakra, which to translate that from energy world into English means this. He's in a state of fear. And I think this is a very powerful man, but he has a certain amount of fear right now, and it's constraining him energetically. And when you have a constriction between your heart chakra and your throat chakra, it's usually because something is making you sad. It's impacting your heart chakra, and it's impacting the way in which you express yourself. You're sad because you can't speak up, or you can't say anything because you're sad. Either way, Donald Tusk is taking this personally. Again, I've consistently from jump said Poland was a thing. And partly that's just geographical. If you look at its relationship to Russia and its proximity to Russia, Finland and Poland are right on the borders. and the Baltic is important for Russia because of the ports, especially with Syria gone. But Donald Tusk is a powerful force, but right now he's kind of going through a bit of an emotional upheaval, I would say, energetically. And I expect that he is going to become more prominent in the coming months.
So
that's
can
my
I
theory
just
on it.
say, yeah, how that shows up for me astrologically, the throat chakra is his Mercury conjunct his South Node in Taurus. Taurus rules the throat, and
For sure.
so and Ceres there as well. But it's because it's conjunct the nodes. This is square his Chiron, and I just want to bring in my beloved Ceres. By transit is just about to transit his Chiron and square his nodes and square his Ceres and square his Mercury. I with it squaring the nodes, his Chiron, I kind of think he's in this healing moment to heal a lot of that and to start speaking out. But yes, it causes fear because it's in his fourth house. This, like, if I speak out, what will happen? It's kind of this inbuilt fear, as you expressed, Andy. But I think Ceres over this is saying, no, this isn't right, kind of thing. You have to do something. So
Yeah, a 4-5 dominant profile is going to be someone who is a social reformer. It's going to be someone like a Gandhi kind of energy,
So
someone who wants to take a role
so
as
when
somebody
you
who makes a change.
can I just ask, when you say 4-5 profile, what are you referring to? Are you referring
So when
to
his heart chakra
no
and his
I mean
throat chakra,
what system, so people realize what they're talking about, what you're talking
the
about?
Andy
Oh,
sees it system. I
oh,
don't
an
know that there is
Andy
a
one.
system.
Okay, so it's
So
not
I have
human, because
ways.
I know we'll get questions about what is the 4-5 profile. Yeah.
Okay, so simplistically, the chakras to me are metaphors of energetic
And they are.
orientation styles. So when I look at him, the way that my brain translates energy, translates information, I see him as having his heart chakra light up to me and his throat chakra light up to me. So when you see, it's like chords on a guitar, or, there's a combination. So this combination, just like you would have conjunctions in astrology, those combinations have a certain kind of orientation, a certain kind of profile. So someone who is a throat chakra, heart chakra dominant, which I believe he is, based on my own 70 years of trying to figure it out, I guess. What that suggests is that he's coming from a space of his emotion, but he's also a powerful force in how he expresses that. Normally, when you see that as the dominant signature, what you're looking at is someone who tries to speak powerfully, but is motivated by his emotions and his desire to be helpful. Heart chakra people are the ones that bring chicken soup. They want to make sure you're okay. They want to make sure everything's going on, that you're feeling safe. When you combine the throat chakra with that, what you're really looking at is someone who's willing to stand up for somebody. So we tend to see these as people, suffragettes, and Jane Addams, those kinds of people. When you look at his energy, that's his dominant orientation. However, constrictions show up as short-term interferences with the natural flow of his energy. He's being thrown into a world that he's probably not used to. I mean, I'm sure that this is a powerful man. He has a history of doing a lot of things. He's worked and he's had role. He was president years ago and has done a lot of stuff at NATO. But I think right now, this is impacting his emotional stability. However, when you look at all this fixed cross, this is a dude, in my opinion, that is good at level setting. Constrictions in his chakra are typically about short-term impacts, and they're usually in the way in which you process information. And I don't want to go into a big chakra thing like here for 3 days,
No,
but just short term, this is a man, in my opinion, who is motivated to be helpful and protective. He has a protective kind of energy. And I think that NATO as a collective is looking at protecting themselves and setting up a new way of doing business, because they can no longer count on the United States to be what the United States has presented themselves to be to Europe since, the late 40s, after World War II.
And
But it's my system and mine alone, I guess.
Oh, no, and it makes sense looking at his astrology, and Pluto also being on his moon and square his sun, and Venus also rules the throat. I think he's being almost forced to actually play that role of kind of speaking out.
For sure.
and moving beyond the constrictions. Anyway, yeah, Kathy, what would you?
Oh, I just want to point out that his Uranus at 2 degrees Leo trines NATO's North Node. So he is he's an activist, or he does do something that activates NATO's role. And I have a chart that Louise sent us that has some of her other beloved little figures in it. And I will just point out that Eris, goddess of discord, the female counterpart to Mars, is at the degree. First off, it's on top of NATO's Venus and Mars, and it's also at the degree where there's going to be a solar eclipse at the end of March. So I think we're seeing with all of this, and he's a big figure in it, shaking up NATO's self-sufficiency and the need for all of the individual members to their own selves take more of a lead in what goes on. And it doesn't necessarily mean, it doesn't mean at all, if you look at Rutte's comments, that the US leaves NATO, but this is challenging all of the member nations to step up and do and contribute more on their own, do more for themselves, which fits the imperative of the Aries Libra eclipses that we've been operating under since March of 2023. Everybody individually has been shoved in the back, had a fire lit up their backside to be more self-determining.
Yep.
And there's one other thing, if I may, real quickly,
Please.
and it involves his nodes. He has Mercury conjunct the South Node. So, and it's in Taurus. So his Mercury, his self-expression has a Venusian kind of quality to it because it's in Taurus. From a karmic standpoint, from a past life standpoint, we see a planet parked on his South Node here, Mercury. This is a man that communicates, but he communicates in a loving way. His Venus is in Taurus, where Venus likes to be, but it's conjunct his sun. So his entire identity, in some sense, this is a man who is comfortable in the skin of a social reformer, professional politician, professional helper. There are politicians who like to destroy things. There are politicians who like to build things. This is Bob the Builder, Don the Builder kind of energy. So from a past life standpoint, and I realize I'm going down an esoteric path here, from a past life standpoint, this man is used to communicating, again, root chakra dominant, but communicating in a way that relates to Venus and stability and second house kinds of things, building prosperity, building security. And his entire identity with his Grand Cross, he's taking on, to quote myself, Shaman College sucks. He's taking on he's taken on a big role here because he feels qualified to do that. That's my opinion. So to me, Donald Tusk is a powerful force, somebody who's done this before. And I think that he may be going through a bit of an emotional kind of upheaval a little bit, and who wouldn't? But I think that he's a very stable influence, and I think he's a big deal. So, sorry, I just get... But yeah, but planets
no, I agree.
On the South Node are important, I think, for sure.
May I add that Taurian emphasis to his communication style, the way he thinks, would make him very aware of earthly consequences
Absolutely.
for everything. And also, I think he would be a slow and deliberate thinker and a very careful,
Absolutely.
very careful speaker until Uranus gets triggered, and then it will just come blurting out.
Yeah, I agree. So, Rutte?
Yes.
Yeah. And I know a lot of people are going to go, oh, you look at the US. We think this is what's happening behind what's happening in the US. Okay, so I think it's important that we kind of look at these again. We've looked at Rutte before. As Kathy said, he's been really, really busy. I do want to point out that 23 Virgo, yet again, is his Uranus, which is, kind of like the revolutionary, but not always in the violent way, like doing things very differently. It's square his Ceres, which is, kind of bringing in, I feel like with that Ceres in Gemini in the 10th house, that he really wants to nurture this alliance. He really wants to build it back up again and make it stronger so that we regain what really the West has lazily given away to Russia and so on over the last quite a while. Also, his moon's at 23 degrees, so and his Chiron, he's got, which is opposing his Uranus, by the way. So he's got everything hit by that 23. He's also got things at 24, which are close, and he's lit up like a Christmas tree in many ways right now. The eclipse will be right on his Uranus too on March the 14th. And as I said, you often feel eclipses coming, especially when it's a total blood red moon eclipse.
The solar eclipse at the end of March will be on his Eris,
Yeah.
the female warrior goddess, which also pulls in Tusk. It pulls in NATO, which we talked about. This last week's Cancer full moon, which with the Mars occultation happened with Mars on his Jupiter, and he was all over the news. He was before the European Parliament. And let me look at when Mars is going to hit 23 Cancer in its retrograde, and that is next week. Yep, next week, 21st. So by next Tuesday, Mars is going to be setting off everything that it's at 23 degrees. It's going to be in an opportunity aspect to his Uranus. It's going to be in a square to his moon. It's going to be trining his Chiron. And remember, and it's at this moment, it's trining his Neptune. There's something bigger going on with him than just a man doing his job. And I will point out that frequently an aspect has a bigger impact or shows up as it is building than when it is absolutely exact. So this is building now until like Tuesday.
It is. So there I've taken it to the point. Well, I make it Thursday, actually. Well, it probably
Thursday,
enters
okay.
the 20,
Yeah,
it probably, but I
yeah.
got it to pretty close to this sextile as well. So Tuesday to Thursday, transiting Mars is also in a supportive aspect of opportunity to transiting Uranus, which is trine his natal Uranus, and in a supportive aspect to his Chiron, and all the things. So Mars and Uranus often bring sudden and radical change, right? So together, we saw that with the Mars-Uranus Algol conjunction, with bringing a lot of change, leading to Biden stepping down, and when Trump got shot in the ear or whatever, in the ear. So, sorry. On Thursday, the moon will be involved too, by the way. And I'd just like to point out his natal Mars at 0 Scorpio pulls in Biden, Harris, Donald Tusk as well. all those 0 to 1 degree areas of fixed signs, and also is being squared by Pluto currently. So. Andy, any thoughts on Rutte again? I mean, I love Rutte, but he's conservative, but he's what I would call the conservative that likes to really conserve things. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's motivated to try to have stability. I mean, and I
Hmm.
think stability is something that people are looking for, both
Hmm.
internationally and within the United States. And the Trump administration promises destabilization. So Rutte and everyone involved in a leadership role in NATO and in other countries, East Asia, South America, all over the world, are looking to find people who can step up and create structure that will give them some sort of stability, excuse me, if the United States no longer leads in the way in which they are historically used to. So I think Rutte is a powerful force. We've talked about him quite a bit. I like his energy. He
Me
has an
too.
awful lot with the United States chart and with Trump's chart. So I do think that he has an impact on what moves forward. And,
Mm.
there's not much more I really want to add besides what you two have pointed out. I think he's a good guy. And I do think that he is determined. And I think the thing that jumps out real quickly about the people that I see in leadership roles in the EU is they tend to be very controlled, well educated, kind of old school professional diplomats rather than reality TV kinds of people. And I
Yeah.
think that that sets up a certain kind of orientation towards the way in which he's likely to operate moving forward. And I think he's a very powerful force. uh, the one thing that jumps out to me looking at his chart is the square between Neptune and the Sun. So I don't think he's somebody who accepts things being out of order. You would think there's a certain kind of I like it here, and I expect him to be very diligent in creating stability in whatever way he can do that.
So I just like to mention one thing that goes back to Kathy talking about the aspects this week as well. I just absolutely love his Pisces energy in his seventh house of allies and open enemies. I love the fact he's called the Trump Whisperer, even though I think it, and I think we all agree that it's because he's got that intuitive quality too to him with all that Pisces in his seventh, so that when he meets these people, he can see what he can sense what's behind the words, kind of thing. But to go back to the aspects, Kathy mentioned the Venus Saturn conjunction coming up, and it is tomorrow at 16 degrees Pisces, which is pretty much the midpoint of his Mercury and Venus. So, he's kind of going to, I think he's possibly going to say something.
He's about to have his Venus return for whatever
Yep.
that's worth.
Yeah, that too. Yeah. And Neptune is on his Saturn, as we've talked about too. It's almost like, I don't want to get too woo, but, that seventh house being lit up, it almost feels like this is his spiritual mission to bring everything back together in some way. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we've been
But it's
talking.
also opposing his Pluto in the first, though. So
Mm-hmm.
all the stuff that's happening in his relationships is also opposing his Pluto in the first there.
Mm-hmm.
And Pluto there in Virgo, he wants to talk in a powerful way. So it could be inspiring him to step up. Again, it could be like what we said about Donald Tusk. His desire to be helpful is
Mm-hmm.
likely to motivate him to take action in terms of communication or putting things into place. These
Yeah.
are not men who are going to be sitting on their hands here in the next few months.
Or
They're,
days.
they're kind of the right players in the right time, at the right moment. I have a theory that often these people are kind of almost put in these places for this moment. They're kind of born for this. Let's say it that way.
So since
Yeah.
Louise brought up all that lovely Pisces energy, I just want
Mm.
to give people a looking ahead. We've mentioned an eclipse an eclipse in March. We've mentioned two eclipses in March. At the end of March, there's going to be a massive pileup of placements in Pisces, really lighting up just emphasizing, and Venus will be retrograde at that time. And she'll be moving into it, but at the end of March, right before Neptune goes from Pisces to Aries, Venus and Neptune will be conjunct. Saturn will be in Pisces. The North Node will be in Pisces. All of these things will be just total immersing or dissolving his. This is big, okay? I'm just saying that Rutte and NATO and also Tusk have big, big, big things happening in March. They play a huge role in March. And you might say, I've gone through my life never hearing of these people. Well, true, but you will now.
I didn't know the name of the previous NATO Secretary General. But yeah, Mercury is just about to retrograde. And as I keep saying, you feel the eclipse energies coming before they're here, and then they reverberate afterwards, and especially in people who are being hit so strongly. So his Uranus Chiron opposition, almost exactly by the full moon eclipse on the 14th, then the new moon eclipse on March the 29th is on his Eris, and all this Pisces stuff here. Like the very next day, Mercury moves back into Pisces. And I've been working with Venus retrograde for quite some time. I've never experienced a Venus retrograde that has a Mercury retrograde in the same signs at the same time, and the eclipse is happening during the Venus retrograde. This is huge, and he's being really lit up by it. So
And
so
so
are all my
everybody,
clients at the moment, by the way. It's like
and everyone's sitting impatiently saying, what does this mean for the US? I think what this means for the US is just sit tight and watch what happens this week. And I think NATO's something big, big coming out of NATO could possibly change the course of events.
Yeah,
Actually,
and
I'll say it will change the course of events. It's just a question of
yeah,
which events, which course.
and I do think Biden knows about this, but he, so all these comments. I hope Biden does something. I'm still getting those every day. We've always said right from the early days that this is more likely to come from Europe, NATO, that side of the pond. So I agree. Sit tight. There's not a lot any of us can do at this point to encourage or change it. It's all in motion, is my thought. Right.
Andy.
Well, I mean, I think it's important when you look at the United States and the potential fear that Trump and his rhetoric and MAGA bring to people. I mean, most of our career over the past 8 years has been trying to help people feel okay about what they see. So if there are any forces that serve as a constraint against Trump and this whole MAGA Project 2025 movement, then I think that's a positive. And if people can kind of hold to that, I'm still very optimistic about things within the United States. And I have an incredibly negative viewpoint towards MAGA and Trump and all of it. But even with that, I still am optimistic. I still think that the primary energy signature of the United States does not match Trump and MAGA. Mm-hmm. And so if there are any forces that are pushing back against them just doing whatever they want to do, then that's a positive. So we not only have to look at, from a political standpoint, what's happening in the United States, we have to look at it on an emotional standpoint, how people respond and what kinds of actions collectively they take. I'm still optimistic about what happens here and what happens on the world stage. I don't think it devolves into the worst case scenario that people might kind of obviously rush towards when they see what Trump is saying and the ways in which the people he surrounds himself with. I still think there's more good people here than not, and I still think that the world finds a stabilizing force And I do think that outside the United States will help congeal that force within the United States. So I think it's important. I hope it's important, but I feel as if it is.
So I just want to give a big shout out for the occultation of Mars that we just had that was right over the USA. It was exactly on his 11th house, Jupiter in Cancer. Speaking of, guardian, protector of people, and, I think he's kind of taken over the role of guardian of the alliance from the US completely. But this occultation on his Jupiter kind of suggests to me that he is going to be the one to bring something big out, huge out. So, but he's a very cautious, strategic person because he's Virgo rising as well, and other things.
And just moving into something a little more woo than we ever get. These things come in threes. In the last week, Trump became a felon formally. In the last week, the J6 report came out showing that he is constitutionally disqualified from taking the oath that he thinks he's going to take on Monday. These things come in threes, and we think the third big thing is going to come from overseas, and that NATO is going to play a role in whatever it is. So there, I've just gone out on a limb, but I've been going out on a limb.
But I completely agree. We just don't know exactly how it's going to come out. I know everybody really wants to know the exact how in the moment. But looking a bit forward again, we'll have another occultation. I think it's like this big holy war between the East and West, basically playing out, but also between the oligarchs and the people. And so, so that's good. There's some more woo for you. But to lead on from all of this, we talked about all these eclipses and the Venus retrograde, all this coming up. We also have another lunar occultation on February the 9th, so not very far away. And that one is over Russia. Just saying.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Well.
Do you want me to see if I could pull up the Russian Federation chart very quickly, or have we got to go?
I think this is enough of a teaser.
Okay. Yep, it's enough of a teaser. I'll look afterwards, and do you want to say what we're doing together on Monday, Kathy?
Oh, yes. So the next time that we're going to be online is on my show for Om Times Radio and TV, 5 p.m. Eastern on Monday, January 20th. That date might clang for some of you. So you can find us on Om Times Radio, Om Times TV, which is a YouTube channel. You can find us at my Facebook page, Empowerment Unlimited. It will be streamed live, and it'll be immediately available afterwards on the Om Times TV YouTube channel and on my Facebook page, Empowerment Unlimited. So we'll be talking about whatever happens or doesn't happen on Monday.
Exactly. So not on the normal channels, but you'll find us live this time. So yay. All right. So as my usual advice, because none of this is anything that we can control at this point individually, is to, look after you and yours, do your self-care. Kathy always says, live in the world you want to be in, or something. And Andy, what do you say? Last words, and then Kathy, what do you say?
Well, I mean, I live in the land of woo, I guess. I mean, I approach things very differently. And, I tend to see things in long-term trends. And I do think that energy, I think there are seeds and they bloom. And astrology is a really good tool at seeing when those things are likely to bloom and if there's going to be sunshine or it's going to be a frost. I'm still incredibly optimistic about things moving forward. And I predicted kind of this years and years and years ago. I tend not to be so great at knowing something's going to happen a week or 2 weeks, but pretty good at seeing sort of the long term trends. And it's based on the ways in which people integrate energy. And the chart is a beautiful place in which to see that. There is a natural predisposition, I think, to the ways in which people operate. And the chart is a really good indicator of that. But in terms of being on a limb, I pretty much lived on the outer branch of the limb for a long time. For me, I don't do a lot. I hadn't done, podcasts for years and years and years, but it's been fun being on this again. The only place really to find me is my website, andrew-brewer.com. And I wish everybody, kind of feel optimistic moving forward and to be empowered within yourself to create a beautiful life for yourself, a magical life for yourself. Whatever's happening with Trump doesn't stop you, although it does set up certain kinds of limitations. And again, I think it's really important we look at how all this rhetoric is impacting women. To me, I think that MAGA is an assault against women just by the way that they talk. And I think it's really important that we all collectively take that into consideration in the ways in which we move forward. And I think for men especially, it's important that we try to be supportive of women and understand how Trump and the MAGA language itself is a threat to women. And
I'd say I want to add people of color and LGBTQ as well. It's all
absolutely
marginal. Yeah.
all people, but
I do agree
important.
men to stand up to what's out there to protect.
I mean, everybody should stand up. It's not just men, but I think it's important that we recognize what's happening, because the ways in which people absorb that, Trump is triggering people who have gone through emotional trauma, and women in this country have gone through emotional trauma at huge numbers. I mean, people who've been verbally sexually abused is gigantic. There's millions, tens, hundreds of millions of people. And so when people absorb that, it's designed to make people feel off kilter. And what I think is important is that we remember we can find stability within ourselves. We can take action collectively within ourselves.
Yep.
Oh, Andy just froze.
Oh.
So we don't see what he's doing.
Oh, I want to give a shout out for my Venus retrograde class too. Just the link is in the description if you want to check it out. It's amazing. But Kathy, last words.
My last words are a little different than what I have said, amplifying on my usual live in the energy of the kind of world you want to be in. Trust your gut and your intuition over anything that you see or read or hear on social media and in the news. And I encourage you to do some things that you do when you know that bad weather is coming. So take a little prepared action now. Make sure you have cash on hand, have some extra water, make sure there's gas in your car, that you have food on hand. And I'm not saying this to be frightening, but just be open to the possibility that there could be some disruptive events leading out of however the situation is handled in the very short-term future. And
it could be a power grid or something like that. So before you think bombs are going to rain on you.
No. I think with Pluto and the Sun meeting, there could be some power problems, and so it's very, very possible. I mean, it's certainly precedent. So make sure that you have what you need. And don't
charge up your devices, all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Batteries, all those things. And then if you get through it fine, yay, you've got a preparedness package there. And if something disruptive does happen, why, then you're not sitting around freaking, you're taken care of. I also encourage people to actually have communication with people that they love and that they like. Be in touch with other people. Please do not isolate now, even if that is your, if you want to crawl into a fetal position and go, oh my God, what's going to happen? I mean, I'm hearing from people who have been very positive for months who are suddenly hitting a point of freak out of, oh my God, is this really going to happen? I don't feel it happening. I could be completely crazy. I don't feel it happening. I know a lot of people who don't feel it happening. We see astrological indications for why it might not happen. But even if it does, stay in how, what you have connected, stay in your own, just for right now, live in your own little happy bubble. This is what all the little happy bubbles are finding each other. And speaking of finding each other, my site, empowermentunlimited.net. I'm on YouTube at Professional Aquarian, on Facebook at Empowerment Unlimited, and I have a group, Astro Insight Lounge, that discusses political astrology or things that happen in the news that play it out. And I will tell people that I am offering every year I do a tarot spread that's based on the 12 houses of the chart for the collective.
And I've seen it.
And it's very, very positive, and it's filled with feminine energy. Take that for whatever you want. Incredibly, surprisingly positive. And anyway, I do offer this at my site in the shop individually. I do personal ones, and I got flooded with orders in like 3 hours after I put it up yesterday. So know that that's there if that's something that you're interested in. And be of good cheer, be of good faith, continue to believe in Santa Claus. I did for a long time. And we'll
It's just did, Port.
See you on Monday. Hopefully some of you will be there live. So, right.